All right, okay, so afternoon everyone, thanks very much for coming along for a midday update in relation to the cyclone that's obviously been making its way towards New Zealand. With me, I've obviously got the Mayor of Auckland, I've got the Chief Executive of NEMA, Dave Gawn, and we've got the General Manager for Emergency Management for Auckland, Adam Maggs. So the good news is that, that in terms of the projected tracking of this cyclone, although it's still inside its original path, it's moved more to the fringes and more to the east, which means that we haven't quite seen the intensity that we had prepared for or that we thought we were going to get hit with. So that is good news. Overnight, we had power outages in Northland. They've been very proactive and had already done some evacuations. Obviously, CDM centres have been activated and stood up all over the country, along with our emergency operations centres. As we moved further down the country, we have had some power outages here in Auckland. There are a couple of roads that have closed due to surface flooding, Waby Valley Road being the most recent. The Harbour Bridge will be closed as a precaution because of the high winds, obviously, that we are expecting. As we move over to the Bay of Plenty, there was about 5,000 households that lost power. There's a very good response there underway at the moment. The last update I had is that 2,000 of those households have had power restored. And then if we move down, and there was also evacuations there, if we move down to Hawke's Bay, they've also had evacuations. They were proactive yesterday and they moved most of the people that needed to be moved. In terms of what we're going to expect over the next 12 hours is we are going to see a bit more of intensification as the cyclone starts to come down and get closer to primarily the east coast, Bay of Plenty, Tairāwhiti and also Hawke's Bay. Probably the peak of the intensity at the moment with the forecasting that we're getting from Met Service is around 2 o'clock, which is also going to coincide with high tides, which of course we're going to have, there's a risk of inundation because of the sheer volume and size of the swell that's been predicted to be anything from sort of 6 right through to maybe worst case scenario 11 metres. So that's where we are at the moment. The good news is the whole of our emergency management system activated as soon as the information came in. That means is that the right people are already pre-positioned and in the right place, and it has positioned us for a very strong response to whatever the cyclone may throw at us. I'll turn to the Mayor. Mayor, have you got any additional comments to make?
No, it seems as though people prepared well. It's not as bad as what we had expected, but that's good news rather than bad news. It was interesting to see people out there yesterday tying their boats up and doing all the sensible things that in preparation. And so the fact that if we've got a bit less than what was expected, that's good news. It doesn't have to be bad just to prove they're right. So thanks for everybody being sensible, and I'm glad we haven't got the results we've had 2 or 3 years ago in the past.
Yeah, I think the Mayor makes a really good point, is that obviously the message continues to be check your civil defence websites, check the Met Service websites, use common sense, use your own danger sense, don't go into floodwaters. If you do need to move, make those decisions early in daylight hours rather than wait for night time, because obviously exponentially it becomes more risky, both for them, for the community and for our first responders. And I just want to acknowledge everyone in our country that has actually made a very big effort in relation to this weather event, because the best response is a whole of society response. I'll open to any questions that you might have.
So can we just clarify, are you planning to close the bridge this afternoon when it hits, or has it been closed at some point?
Yeah, Adam?
Thanks, Minister. Look, with regards to bridge, what we're doing is we've got ATOC looking at it from a precautionary perspective, so they are ready to restrict access to the bridge or close it fully if needed. At the moment, they're just really monitoring the wind to just check on what's happening.
And we've seen a bit of complacency. We've seen people are evacuating and ignoring evacuation orders in different communities, and people who perhaps aren't taking this seriously, they say that it's scaremongering. And now with this message that the storm has been downgraded, what is your message to those people who are saying that this is a little bit too much?
Well, it's the biggest, when I became Minister, one of the challenges we had as Kiwis, we have the she'll be right mate. There was a optimism bias that sat inside the system, which equals complacency. And we don't have the luxury of being complacent. Our job is to keep people alive and try and protect lives and property and get through these events. Those people that are complacent, that don't take the measures, that don't take some personal responsibility, are normally the ones that end up putting their hand up and putting our first responders at risk when they have to go and rescue them. So I would say, if you're going to be responsible, engage and actually look what you can do to help with the overall response to these weather events. We lose people, and very recently we went through a tragedy for us as a country with the people that we lost at both the Mount and at Welcome Bay. So, we shouldn't take these things lightly. The minute that you do is the minute that we start actually losing people.
I think the other thing is that the weather forecast is not quite as accurate as you might have been led to believe. They're doing their very best with it, but only a couple of weeks ago we had a flood up north that was largely unpredicted. So I think we've got to take these things seriously. Not everyone will be as bad as what they think, but for everyone like that, there'll be one that's worse than what they think. So we've got to be sensible, and we are living in a time when these 50-year floods seems to be coming a lot more often than 50 years. So
I think the other challenge is that just by the sheer nature of these events, that they can be very localised and intense. So you can have literally one half of a township that is business as usual, and the other half that's flooded on their knees, full of anxiety and needing support. So I understand where there can be complacency come in, but if we want to be really good at this as a country and make sure that we reduce the cost of recovery and that we look after each other, then there's not really that much room for complacency.
Minister, what areas of New Zealand and what specific hazards are you most concerned about at this point in time of year?
Yeah, so the areas of focus are really the Coromandel. It was Great Barrier, but it sounds like the feedback that we're getting there recently, Adam, is that it's looking pretty good out of the barrier. So it's going to be the Coromandel, it's going to be the Bay of Plenty, right up around the East Cape into Tairāwhiti and down into Hawke's Bay. So that's where the big focus is, and that's where we're expecting to have a more intense weather events in relation to the cyclone.
We're hearing whole communities being evacuated by this big schools. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of where the Defence Force is currently deployed and where they could be deployed to?
So they pre-position, and Defence Force quite simply do an outstanding job. They've got access to equipment like unimogs that can move through floodwaters a lot more safely than civilian or conventional vehicles, and so they are used and deployed to get people out and move them safely. They did that in the last weather event that we had in Northland, and Defence personnel are pre-positioned into the areas that are identified where there may be a need for a mass evacuation or to move people. But like I said, they've already been very proactive, so you've had people moved to Northland and Waikato, Bay of Plenty and Hawke's Bay yesterday.
Tied after is going to be slash problems and recent events. What concerns do you have about that for this particular event?
Yeah, slash is always a problem with all of these events. We saw that up around the East Cape in the last event, is that slash had a serious impact on some of the houses up there, and we ended up with several people stuck on the roof of a home at night that we had to organise and get them to safety. So slash, unfortunately, because of the amount of forestry right through that area, remains a concern. There's not much that you can do about that at the time. Obviously, that's a part of the recovery phase in terms of how that's dealt with.
In Hawke, we understand that emergency services will not go up if the wind is over 100 kilometres per hour. Being briefed on any of this?
Well, emergency services will always respond where there's need, but they of course will go through a risk assessment in terms of what is the best response and how do we get the help to the people that require it.
And are there any specific civil defence instructions for who should and shouldn't be driving, especially in those areas of high concern?
So the advice for areas of high concern is that if you can avoid travel, do that. Try to keep the traffic to the minimum. Even coming in here this morning, it was obvious that people are doing that. The traffic was very light, and I'd just say thank you to them. Obviously, necessary travel, or travel where you have to or must travel, then that's fine. But where you don't have to, where you can reorganise yourself a bit better, keep your vehicle off the road, keep yourselves off the road. That is the advice.
And many communities, as you've said, and you've raised yourself, are still recovering from those January What do you worry the consequences are going to be of the cyclone severity?
Yeah, so of course that compounding effect that many of these areas are still in recovery from the previous weather events. So that complicates things a bit. The ground a lot of the ground, especially up in Northland, has lost the ability to absorb water, which of course compounds surface flooding. And of course the other thing that we're very sensitive to is fatigue. Fatigue starting to set in with communities that have had a rolling wall of weather events to deal with, and we take measures and we look at how we can best manage that.
And has the beehive pump been stood up yet? Is it on standby, and where's our national?
No, it has been stood up, and NEMA have got the lead down there, and it is a fully set up bunker now with coordination and with oversight in terms of our response, nationally.
And what about your plans today? Are
My-
you still planning to get south?
Yeah, my plans today are to travel over to Tauranga, which is where we expect the cyclone to impact more severely than what we've seen up until now, and maybe move through to Apotiki as well.
And sorry, we've actually just had Pakatane is just put out a press release saying the storm was actually worse than they expected, with 12 metre swells and 150k winds. So have you been correct on that? Is that some areas are actually?
So that we've come up here actually to speak with you guys. There is an ongoing briefing at the moment that is just occurring where all of the district councils, local controllers and teams are actually sharing that information. So yes, 140 k's is just outside the envelope of what we're expecting. 12 metres is right at the extreme of what we're expecting in terms of that swell surge. And like I said, the concerning time is really from 2 o'clock this afternoon onwards, when we got high tides combined with those big swells.
So some areas will be hit harder than expected, whilst some will be hit.
No, we've planned for the worst case scenario. It is a cyclone, and unfortunately, as a country, we've got experience at the devastation that these cyclones can cause. So no, the planning is in place, and I'm very comfortable with that. But yes, the area that you just spoke about, Whakatane, through the Bay of Plenty, right up round Tairāwhiti, that is where we expect the most intense and severe weather event to happen.
Tauranga residents sitting with the flooding that we was not yet seen before. What more do we know about what that might look like?
Well, flooding is that there's three things that we're going to be hit with this weather event. One is wind, very strong winds coming from different directions, which poses major issues with power outages. We've got slips, obviously, because we've got ground that has lost the ability to absorb a lot of water, and we've got flooding. And so those are the three things that we're working to, that we have planned for, and we're seeing that manifest itself with this weather event. It's just that some of the areas, Northland, for example, it has not been as intense as what we thought, but obviously other areas that we've highlighted that are in a state of, have a red alert, the Bay of Plenty, Tairāwhiti down to Hawke's Bay, Coromandel as well, is definitely going to get some more rain. I spoke with the Mayor this morning, and he was saying that they weren't hit as hard as what they anticipated or thought they would be overnight, but like I said, the next 12 hours is when we're really likely to see an intensification of this weather front.
The thing is, with the weather forecasters planned the possible route of this, it's only got to vary a bit, and it's a different province that gets banged. And so we're a bit lucky that it's Auckland and Northland got less this time than previous times. We've had more than we've expected, and so it's, I think that's what the Minister is saying. The whole country has to be prepared for this, because it's only got to vary a bit, and it's a different province. And so I think that's why you've had a nationwide standing up. So
it's not the Met Service. They do an outstanding job, without a doubt, and they model it and they try to get as close as we can to predicting where these weather fronts go. But the last one that we dealt with, it came down the island and then it turned around and it came back up the middle. So that's why everyone is prepared and everyone is ready to anticipate if there is a change of direction or something does happen with this cyclone. We try to predict them as much as possible, but at the end of the day, it's weather, and it's not a perfect science. Well, I mean, I just want to acknowledge our contractors, our roading contractors, because they're sort of the unsung heroes often in these situations, because they will get out onto the ground as quickly as possible, and when it's safe, to start clearing those slips and start opening up at least one lane, so that we do get access. Because, you know, for example, the Coromandel, yes, we did have communities that were cut off there in the January weather event that came through, and so roads are cleared as quickly as they can. Obviously, safety being the number one priority in terms of those decisions.
Are you expecting much further damage in Auckland as that wind sort of turns to the south-westerly?
Well, Auckland is still. I'll let Adam speak to that in
Hopefully
detail.
not.
But yeah, hopefully not. But in reality, you can see that there's been intensification with the rain, and there will definitely be a bit of wind probably hitting Auckland this afternoon. But I'll let Adam talk to the detail on that.
Yeah. So look, in terms of Auckland, the weather has been an easing trend in terms of what we've seen in terms of wind and rain. Rain at the levels we expected, but this afternoon from midday, we are expecting a shift to a westerly, southwesterly, and that will kick up, and it could be quite strong. So that's really where our focus is. I think the key thing for us is to acknowledge that Aucklanders have listened to the messages. They're being careful on the road, only driving if necessary, because we are expecting a bit of wind this afternoon. That should start easing from 6 p.m. onwards, and then from 7 we should see it starting to ease away.
So there's no communities in Tamaki which you have concerns for, which could potentially be evacuated?
Correct. No, at this stage, our communities are fine. We stood up 5 CDCs overnight. They haven't had a lot of pressure in terms of need. However, we are working really closely with community, iwi, marae, and our official teams to make sure that we're looking after Tamaki. But yeah, at this stage, it's an easing trend would be the way that I'd describe it, except for this afternoon where we may see those southwesterlies and some strong winds as the system moves off down the island. Kia ora.
Excellent. If,
Do you have any rough idea of numbers?
oh, look, it's in the hundreds. I think there was, it might have been 200 up north. I think there was about, might be the same number in Waikato, and I think there was about 400 down in Hawke's Bay. But I'd have to go back and check the numbers for you. But it's in the hundreds. It's not in the thousands. But you know, everyone is vigilant, and people are making good decisions and moving early, and that'll continue to be monitored.
And is that people or properties?
No, that's people. Yeah.
Don't move properties.
No. All right, you guys happy with that? Okay, thanks for being here, guys. I just want to say that we've noticed that the media are really stepping up and realising they've got a really important part to play in terms of getting information out to people. So thank you for the stuff that you guys are doing as well. Appreciate it.
Kia ora.